Ever get that feeling, that like everyone else has this whole happiness thing figured out?
Hmm.
But then you look around and it's like, wait, is that just me?
Yeah.
So today's deep dive is for anyone who's ever felt that way.
Totally.
We're going way past like the surface level self-help things
Yeah. Yeah.
and getting real, really real about suffering and not even just how to avoid it, but
Right.
like how to actually learn from it.
I like that.
Our guide for this whole journey is Thich Nhat Hanh and his book, No Mud, No Logos.
Ooh, classic.
So yeah, if you haven't read it,
Definitely a good one.
highly recommend it.
Yeah.
But get ready for some, honestly, kind of surprising insights from Buddhist teachings about finding joy in well, unexpected places.
Yeah, and it's not just about joy, right? Like fleeting happiness, but this deeper sense of peace that comes from really understanding what we go through.
Okay, so let's dive right into this idea. Suffering and happiness being like connected.
Okay.
This isn't just some vague thing, right? Like they just balance each other
Oh,
out.
no, not vague at all. Think of it this way. If you've, let's say, only ever experienced pure ease, comfort, all good things,
Okay.
how would you even recognize what real joy is?
Hmm.
And he compares it to a lotus needing mud to grow.
Right.
It needs that muck.
Yeah.
It's that contrast that
Yeah.
makes, lets appreciation actually flourish.
Okay. See, that actually makes a lot of sense. But
Yeah.
it's like we naturally try to dodge the mud.
Oh, 100%.
Like at all costs.
All the time.
Yeah.
We're thinking, if I could just ditch this one obstacle, this one thing, then I'll finally be happy.
Right, right. If this, then that.
But he'd say, trying to live without like any suffering. It's like wanting a left side but no right side. They coexist.
Yeah, they're two sides of the same coin, right?
Exactly.
So, okay, so instead of this constant like battle to get rid of anything difficult, what if we shifted how we see it?
Yeah, our perspective.
I'm remembering Han uses this example about like cold air.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
I think about that one a lot.
So good. Because if you're caught off guard, no jacket, you know the deal. That chill is brutal.
Worse.
Same, coal bundled up could be like refreshing, invigorating even. It's the same input, but totally different depending on, us, our relationship to it.
It's such a good way, such an interesting way to think about it. But how do we do that? Like shift that perspective, especially with the hard stuff, No one actually enjoys going through tough times.
No, for sure not. And it's not about enjoying it, right? It's more about how we relate to it, how we choose to react or not react. And that's where mindfulness comes in, like a tool, creates a little space between us and that knee-jerk reaction.
Okay. So mindfulness. Okay. It's like one of those words, right? Gets tossed around all over the place these days.
Sure. Yeah.
But what's it actually look like when it's not just like a meditation app ad, When we're dealing with something really difficult.
Yeah, it's not about pretending everything's fine.
Yeah.
Or like forcing our minds to be totally blank, which good luck with that.
Right. Like, good luck, brain.
It's really about just being there with whatever is there.
Yeah.
Without getting totally swept away,
Yeah.
Like by the sheer intensity of it all.
Okay, that makes sense. But the doing part, right? Because our instinct, like default mode, is to run, avoid, distract, anything but actually be with the yucky stuff.
Oh, absolutely. It's uncomfortable. And that's why, I appreciate that Han's like, okay, enough concepts, let's give you some tools.
Yes, please. Give us the tools. I think we can all use a little more like practical stuff in our lives.
100%. And one of the, I think, most powerful ones he talks about is stopping and acknowledging, which it's as straightforward as it sounds, really. Suffering pops up. You hit
Right.
pause.
So just like a mental timeout.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be this big, long thing. Even a few seconds, like, it can totally shift things. And in that pause, you're not fixing, you're not judging, you're just, hey, suffering, I see you. Just acknowledging it's there. Open mind.
Instead of that like immediate urge to either make it go away or like
Oh, yeah.
pretend it's not happening.
Yeah, exactly. And he even gives this little mantra, to use. Breathing in, he says, I know suffering is there. Breathing out, I say hello to my suffering.
Hello, suffering. I kind of like that. There's no judgment, no fighting, just like fact.
Exactly. Just acknowledging this is what is.
Yeah.
Right? And from that place, from that starting point,
Yeah.
then we can actually start to work with it more skillfully,
I like that, skillfully.
And another technique kind of builds on this. He calls it embracing with tenderness.
Embracing suffering. That seems I don't know,
It
counterintuitive.
sounds a little strange, right? But think about it this way, like, if you've got a kid or someone you care about who's hurting, what do you do?
You comfort them, offer compassion, give them a safe space to feel whatever they're feeling.
Exactly that. That's the same energy, we want to bring to our own experience. Instead of beating ourselves up, pushing it down, it's more like, hey, this is rough. I'm here for you. Kindness, understanding.
Because it's not that the suffering's suddenly great, it's that we're relating to it completely differently.
Yes. And that shift, that can be really, really powerful. Now, once we've done that, created a little space with those first two, that's when we can go a bit deeper. Han calls it looking deeply.
Okay, so we've stopped, acknowledged, kind of made friends with it, and now we're getting curious about where it's coming from.
Yeah, we're getting curious. What's the root of this? What
Yeah.
caused it? What beliefs, what patterns might be like the fuel keeping it going?
This is where, for me anyway, this is where it gets super interesting, because it's not always obvious, is it? Like, we might need to do some real digging to get to the root of our suffering.
You got it. And sometimes it's deep, man. Han even talks about like inheriting suffering from our families,
Yeah.
ancestors, unresolved stuff passed down.
Whoa. Okay, that is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. So it's not always just our stuff, but like
Yeah.
generations of it maybe?
Generations of it. Heavy, right? But the cool thing is, by seeing it, by acknowledging those layers, that's how we can start to like heal, not just for us,
Yeah.
but for everyone who comes after us too.
That's amazing. Okay, so we've been talking about, like how to understand suffering better, meeting it with mindfulness. But the million-dollar question, right?
Mm-hmm.
The one I think everybody wants the answer to is, how do we get to the happiness part of all this?
Right.
Is this all just like positive vibes only, manifestation boards, gratitude journals, all that?
Well, those things can have their place for sure. But Han's take on happiness, it's a little deeper than that. He'd probably say it's not something you find out there like a lost object.
Okay.
It's something you cultivate. It's active,
I like that.
And a big part of that is actually about letting go.
Letting go. See, now that seems kind of backwards. Isn't the whole point to hold on to the stuff that makes us happy? Our things, the people we love, even just our ideas about how life should be.
And that's the paradox, right? We get so busy clinging to this idea of happiness,
Yeah.
and we end up creating a whole lot more suffering on top of it. Han tells this great story. It's about a really wealthy governor, Badia.
Oh, right. Yeah, the one who gives up literally everything, his power, money, the whole 9 yards to live as a monk.
That's the one. And you'd think, man, what a raw deal. But then there's this moment that he is meditating one evening, and it hits him. He's never, ever felt so free, so genuinely happy.
Because he'd finally let go of all that stuff, all the things he thought were like prerequisites for happiness.
Yes. Like, happiness wasn't out there attached to his fancy title.
Right.
Or how much gold he had. It was like, it was always there, inside.
Okay, that's a powerful lesson. So what are we, the people listening, what should we be taking away from this? Like, what are we holding on to that's got to go, to make room for joy?
It's going to be different for everyone, right?
Yeah.
But it could be a past hurt that we can't seem to forgive,
Mm-hmm.
or a fear of failing, so we just never, we never actually go after the things we really want.
Oh, yeah.
Even just clinging to a really specific picture of how our lives should look, that's a recipe for suffering because, well, life, right? It rarely goes according to plan.
Yeah.
Letting go. It's not about not caring. It's more like loosening our grip a little bit
Mm-hmm.
and giving things space to just unfold.
So letting go is one piece of this. What else does Han say we can, actively work on to cultivate happiness?
He talks about something he calls inviting positive seeds, which it's about really making an effort to nurture the good stuff inside of us. Compassion, gratitude, joy, kindness, those qualities.
So not just like hoping they show up, but really intentionally nurturing them.
Totally. It's more like tending a garden, right? We've got to pull the weeds of the negativity and really mindfully plant what we want to see grow.
I like that.
And then there's this concept of right action, which basically means, are we living in a way that matches up with our values?
So our actions, not just our thoughts, play a role in all this.
A huge role.
Yeah.
It's about asking ourselves, is this what I'm doing? Is this contributing to more peace, more justice? And it goes beyond just us as individuals too, which is, well, kind of the whole point.
Okay, so how does our personal happiness tie into the bigger picture?
Well, there's this Buddhist folktale. I love this one. It's about the Buddha and Mara, who, represents temptation, suffering, all that.
Hmm.
And the Buddha, he just asks for a place of peace. And guess what happens? He basically ends up encompassing like the whole earth.
Wow. Okay, that's a powerful image. So it's not just about us being happy in isolation. It actually like it radiates outwards. But how do we live that way? That feels, I don't know, almost overwhelming to think about.
It's a lifelong practice, not a one-time thing, right? But Han, he talks about this idea of right consumption.
Hmm.
And it's about, being really present with our choices. What are we eating? What are we buying? Even just like what kind of information are we taking in? Are those choices contributing to, more suffering or more happiness?
So every little thing, even just like what we pick up at the grocery store,
Oh, yeah.
that can either keep the cycle of suffering going, or it can be a tiny little act of making things a little bit better, a little brighter.
Exactly. And that's kind of radical when you think about it. We have so much more power than we realize.
I'm walking away from this deep dive with a lot to think about, I gotta say. What are like some key takeaways you hope people really, really hold on to?
Remember this. Suffering, it's part of life. It happens to everyone. Doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Cultivate mindfulness. It's like your superpower to be with your experience without getting totally taken out by it. And finally, happiness. It's not a destination. It's an ongoing practice. You cultivate it by letting go, by nurturing the good stuff inside of you, and by making choices every day, even tiny ones, that line up with who you really are, who you want to be in the world.
It's a journey, not a quick fix. And honestly, I think that's where the really good stuff happens. Thanks so much for taking this deep dive with us. And to everyone listening, we'll leave you with this. What's one small shift you could make in your own life, your own choices, that might just create a little ripple of happiness, not just for you, but for everyone around you? Until next time, keep diving.